Welcome. If you're thinking about buying or selling a home, maybe jumping into that journey, especially here in the really vibrant metro Atlanta, Georgia area, then you've come to the right place. We're brought to you by Erie Realty, your local guides, really ready to help you navigate this market with confidence. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on something you'll definitely see in pretty much any real estate deal. Contingencies.
hmm
They look like maybe just legal jargon, but honestly, they're foundational, critical conditions that can quite literally make or break your deal.
That's absolutely right. You can think of them as like an essential safety net woven right into the whole buying and selling process. Our goal here today is to really cut through that complexity,
Yeah.
and highlight the real key points about contingencies, make them super clear so you feel more empowered, more confident when you see them pop up in a contract. Doesn't matter if you're buying or selling.
Okay, let's dig in it on it like a basic level. What is a real estate contingency?
Okay, so fundamentally, a contingency clause, it's just a condition. A specific requirement inside that contract that has to be met for the whole thing to become legally binding and, move towards closing. It's some event or action that needs to happen, usually within a certain time frame.
So the whole deal is kind of on hold, waiting for this one thing.
Pretty much, yeah. And the crucial part is that safety valve it gives you. If that specific condition, whatever it is, isn't met by the deadline everyone agreed on, well, then one or sometimes both parties generally have the legal right to terminate the contract.
Without penalty.
Without penalty, that's the key. It's often described as like an undo button or maybe more like an escape hatch built into the contract.
An escape hatch. I like that. So it's mainly about giving folks a way out if things don't go quite as planned.
Exactly. They protect buyers and sellers, too, by making sure the contract isn't totally locked in until certain, crucial things are cleared. It's an agreed upon what if.
Got it. Now, I hear people talk about contingency clauses and then also a house being a contingent listing. Same thing.
That's a great question. Easy to mix those up. So the contingency clause is the specific wording, the condition written into the contract document, like this deal depends on the buyer getting their loan.
Okay.
A contingent listing, on the other hand, that's about the property's status, like on the market. It means, okay, a buyer made an offer, the seller accepted it, they're officially under contract, but the sale is still contingent. It hinges on those specific conditions, those clauses, being met before the sale is totally final and moves to, say, pending and then closed.
Okay. So the listing status tells you the conditions exist and the clauses tell you what they are. Makes sense. Right, let's get into the nuts and bolts. What are the most common contingencies someone here in Metro Atlanta is likely to actually see? Where do we start?
Well, the one you'll almost always see, especially if you're getting a mortgage, is the mortgage or financing contingency. This is really fundamental protection, mostly for the buyer.
Right. Walk me through that. How does it work?
Okay, so it gives the buyer a set amount of time, usually maybe a few weeks after the contract's signed, to get the final full approval for the mortgage they need. If, for some reason you apply, you do everything right, but the lender just doesn't give that final thumbs up by the deadline, maybe something unexpected happened with credit or the bank's backed up, this contingency gives you the legal out, you can withdraw.
And the earnest money, that deposit you put down.
That's exactly what it safeguards. If you have that financing contingency in place and you have to cancel because you couldn't get the loan approved under the terms laid out, you typically get your earnest money deposit straight back.
Ah.
Without it, if financing just collapsed, you could potentially lose that deposit. No protected way out, see? Lenders themselves often want this in there, too.
So the bank might even require it. Okay, that makes total sense. Big one, financing. What's another common one?
Another really critical one, again, mainly protecting the buyer, is the title contingency.
Title. Like making sure the seller actually owns the place free and clear.
Exactly that. This contingency gives the buyer, and usually their lender or attorney, the right to do a thorough title search. Think of it like digging into the property's legal history. Who owned it? Are there any claims against it? Liens, stuff like that. The contingency is there to make sure that if this search digs up unexpected problems, maybe unpaid taxes, a contractor's land from years ago, boundary line issues, they can be dealt with.
What kinds of things could really bite you later if you skip this?
Oh, you could find out there's an old mechanic's lien, a roofer wasn't paid by the last owner, or maybe an old mortgage that wasn't properly cleared, even like unresolved claims from an inheritance or divorce. The title contingency aims to ensure you get what's called a marketable title, basically, clear ownership without these nasty surprises popping up later. If big issues are found and the seller can't or won't fix them before closing, the buyer can usually use this contingency to walk away, deposit in hand.
Wow, yeah. You definitely don't want to buy a house and then find out someone else has a claim on it. Okay, title check. What about the house itself, the physical condition?
That brings us right to probably the most common one after financing, the home inspection contingency. This is the buyer's chance to really kick the tires, look under the hood.
Okay, I know inspections are pretty standard, but what does the contingency part actually do?
Right, so the contingency clause itself carves out a specific time window, maybe 7 days, maybe 10 or 14, for the buyer to bring in their own professional home inspector. This inspector goes through everything: roof, foundation, the heating and cooling, electrical systems, plumbing, looking for major issues.
And if they find something serious, like a leaky roof or foundation cracks?
Exactly. If the report comes back showing significant problems, yeah, major leaks, structural defects, maybe outdated and dangerous wiring, big plumbing issues, the contingency gives the buyer leverage.
Leverage to do what exactly?
Well, typically the buyer can go back to the seller with the report and say, hey, look at this. They can ask the seller to make specific repairs before closing, or maybe negotiate a lower price, or ask for a credit at closing to cover the cost of fixing things themselves later. But crucially, if the seller says, nope, not fixing it, or they just can't agree on a solution, the home inspection contingency usually gives the buyer the right to just walk away.
And get their earnest money back.
And get their earnest money back. It's your main protection against unknowingly buying a potential money pit.
Huge protection, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, now what about buyers who need to sell their current place first to afford the new one?
Yes. There's a specific contingency for that exact situation. It's usually called the sale of a prior home contingency, or sometimes just a home sale contingency.
How's that one structured?
So the buyer basically makes their offer conditional on them successfully selling their existing house by a certain date. It buys them time, essentially. If they just can't get their old place sold and closed by that deadline, this contingency lets them terminate the contract on the new house without losing their deposit.
Okay, I can see why a buyer would absolutely need that sometimes.
Right?
But flipping that around, for the seller, that must add a lot of what-ifs, right? Their sale depends on some other sale happening smoothly.
You nailed it. That's the core tension with this one. For the buyer, it can be financial necessity. For the seller, though, it introduces a pretty big variable, a lot of uncertainty. Because of that, yeah, offers with a home sale contingency might look less attractive to sellers, especially if it's a seller's market, lots of offers. They might prefer one without that extra layer of risk.
So they might take a slightly lower offer if it doesn't have that contingency.
They might. Or sometimes sellers will accept it, but include what's called a kick-out clause. This lets the seller keep marketing their home, and if a better non-contingent offer comes along, they can accept it after giving the original buyer 48 or 72 hours to decide. Either remove your home sale contingency and move forward, or let the house go to the new buyer.
Interesting. A way to manage their risk, too. Okay, what about the actual value of the house being bought?
That takes us to the appraisal contingency, and this one is super important, especially when there's a mortgage involved, which, let's face it, is most of the time.
Because the bank needs to be sure the house is actually worth the loan amount.
Exactly right. Your lender is definitely going to order an independent appraisal to figure out the property's fair market value. The appraisal contingency clause basically says the home must appraise for at least the price you agreed to pay in the contract. It protects you, the buyer, but also the lender.
So what happens if it comes in low? Let's say you offered $400,000, but the appraiser says it's only worth $380,000.
Yeah, that definitely happens, especially when prices are climbing fast. If you have an appraisal contingency and the appraisal comes in below the contract price, you generally have options. You could try to renegotiate with the seller, ask them to lower the price to the appraised value, the $380K.
Okay.
Or maybe you decide you love the house enough and you have the cash to make up that $20,000 difference yourself.
Right.
But if you can't reach an agreement with the seller, or you can't cover the gap, the appraisal contingency gives you the right to terminate the contract and, again, get your earnest money back. It stops you from being forced to overpay, at least according to the bank's valuation.
Makes total sense. The bank won't lend $400K on a $380K asset. You need this protection. Got
Yeah.
it. Any other sort of common ones?
One more that pops up is the homeowner's insurance contingency. This isn't so much about the house's condition, but more about, can you actually get insurance on it and at a reasonable cost?
Why would that be a contingency? I thought everyone
Evan.
just gets homeowners insurance.
Usually, yes. Lenders absolutely require it by closing to protect their investment against, fire, storms, things like that. But sometimes, maybe depending on the property's specific location or history, like if it's in a flood-prone area or has had lots of past claims, getting insurance might be unexpectedly difficult or incredibly expensive.
Oh, okay.
So this contingency basically says the deal is conditional on the buyer being able to secure adequate homeowner's insurance by a certain date. If they just can't get it, or maybe the only policy available is prohibitively costly, this might allow either party, depending how it's written, to withdraw. It prevents the deal from collapsing right at the finish line because insurance is a no-go.
Okay, wow. So the big ones seem to be financing, title, inspection, maybe selling your old home, the appraisal, and even getting homeowners insurance. Now, what's the bottom line if one of these conditions isn't met by the deadline?
Yeah, so when a contingent condition isn't satisfied within that agreed time frame, the contract often becomes what's legally termed null and void.
Meaning, it's just off. Kaput.
Essentially, yes. It means it's no longer legally enforceable. The deal dissolves.
And usually the buyer just walks away then.
In many situations, yes. The party who is protected by that specific contingency, which is often the buyer, as we've seen, can typically exercise their right to terminate the contract. But, like we touched on, it doesn't always have to be the absolute end of the road right away. Sometimes the failure of a contingency just opens up a new round of negotiation.
Right, like with the inspection example. Maybe you don't cancel, you just ask for repairs or money off instead.
Exactly. Or if, say, the buyer's loan approval is just delayed, maybe everyone agrees to extend the financing contingency deadline by a week. Or if the appraisal is low, maybe the buyer and seller meet somewhere in the middle on price. It allows for a potential fix before totally pulling the plug. But if you can't reach a new agreement, the contingency provides that clean exit path.
And this is all directly tied back to that earnest money deposit, isn't it?
Absolutely, 100%. Contingencies are fundamentally linked to protecting your earnest money. That deposit shows you're serious, right? If you just change your mind about the house for a reason that's not covered by a contingency, like you just get cold feet, the seller often has the right to keep your deposit as damages for taking the house off the market.
Okay.
But if you have to back out because a specific condition protected by a contingency wasn't met, the loan didn't get approved, the inspection found huge problems the seller won't fix, the appraisal came in too low, that contingency is your justification. It allows you to legally terminate and get that earnest money back. It's the safety net for your deposit.
That really underscores how vital they are, especially for a buyer putting down potentially thousands of dollars up front.
They truly are a
Got it.
critical safety mechanism.
Okay, so they offer amazing protection. But I've also heard, that maybe including too many contingencies can make your offer look less appealing to a seller. Is there truth to that?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. And that's a huge strategic point to consider, especially if you're buying in a competitive area like we often see around Metro Atlanta. Think about it from the seller's perspective. Each contingency, while protecting the buyer, also represents another potential roadblock, another hurdle the deal has to clear before it actually closes and they get their money.
So more contingencies means more uncertainty for the seller, more ways the deal could fall apart.
Exactly. If a seller gets, say, 2 offers for the same price, but one has only a financing contingency and the other has financing, inspection, appraisal, and the sale of the buyer's current home, which one looks like a sure bet to close?
Yeah, the simpler one, the one with fewer ifs.
Right. Sellers crave certainty. So an offer with fewer conditions, sometimes called a cleaner offer, often looks much stronger, much more likely to actually reach the closing table.
I get that. It's like this price is good, but man, are all these things actually going to line up?
Precisely. So while you absolutely need protection, deciding which contingencies are essential for you versus which ones you might be willing to risk waiving in a really hot market, that becomes a serious strategic calculation.
What kind of risks are we talking about if you waive one? Like waiving the inspection.
Yeah, that's a big one. Waiving the inspection contingency means you're essentially agreeing to buy the property as is, whatever condition it's in. You lose the ability to renegotiate or walk away based on inspection findings. You could uncover huge, expensive problems after closing that are now yours to deal with. Or waiving the appraisal contingency. If the appraisal comes in low, you're on the hook to bring extra cash to closing to cover that gap, or you could risk defaulting on the contract and losing your earnest money. These are major financial risks.
Wow. So it really is this delicate balancing act, protecting yourself versus making your offer stand out enough to even get accepted in the first place.
It really is. It demands a very clear look at your own finances, your tolerance for risk, and the specifics of the property itself, all balanced against the current market conditions.
This definitely sounds like something you shouldn't just guess at on your own.
Oh, absolutely not. This is exactly where having experienced professionals in your corner is just indispensable.
Yeah.
A good real estate agent, someone who really knows the local market, like here in Metro Atlanta, they understand how contingencies typically work here, what's standard, what's aggressive.
Hmm.
They can advise you on crafting an offer that protects your core interests while still being competitive. They help you weigh those risks and benefits.
And maybe a lawyer too.
Yeah, especially for reviewing the actual contract language. A real estate attorney can make sure the clauses are written clearly, that they actually do what you think they do, and explain the legal ramifications if something goes wrong. Having that team a great agent, maybe an attorney, is key.
It really sounds like having that trusted team is the way to go. To navigate all this complexity, not just contingencies, but the whole process.
Definitely provides peace of mind. Helps you avoid nasty surprises.
Okay, so just to quickly wrap our heads around this. Real estate contingencies. They're those vital conditions built into the contract, things that must happen for the deal to finalize. They act as crucial safeguards, especially for buyers, giving you a legal way out, usually with your earnest money back, if key things like financing, inspection, or appraisal don't work out as planned within the set time.
Yeah, understanding these clauses isn't just like good to know. It's absolutely critical for protecting yourself, managing risk, and really aiming for a smoother transaction overall, whether you're the one buying or the one selling.
And it kind of leaves us mulling over this, doesn't it? Considering how strategic these can be, how much risk versus reward is involved, especially when the market heats up or cools down, how do buyers and sellers really figure out that perfect balance, using contingencies or maybe limiting them to protect themselves but still get the deal done? It's a real chess match sometimes.
It is a complex puzzle with pretty significant financial stakes.
So if you're here in the metro Atlanta, Georgia area, and you're trying to make sense of real estate contracts, figure out which contingencies you need or how to handle them in an offer, please don't try to navigate it all alone. Getting advice from an experienced professional is really the smartest move you can make.
And you can definitely reach out to the team at Erie Realty. They offer expert guidance specifically tailored for the nuances of the Metro Atlanta market.
Give them a call. That number is 678-775-8108. Again, 678-775-8108. They can help you decode contingencies and guide you through every other step of your real estate journey.